Coming up on your news at 5, protests across the nation and across Alaska. We'll take you to the hands-off rally in downtown Anchorage. Then the Supreme Court rebuking President Trump's usage of the Alien Enemies Act. What comes next for the controversial order?
And a rather tranquil day weather-wise, but a little bit of shaking in south central Alaska in the last 12 hours. I'll explain. And the forecast coming up.
You're watching Alaska's news source.
Thank you for joining us on your news at 5. For the second time this month, organizers in every state arranged a nationwide weekend of protests to demonstrate and vocalize disapproval of President Donald Trump's administration's actions. Protests erupted across the state today. Olivia Nordyke was in Anchorage and brings us the details.
Today, Americans are taking to the streets in protest, and so is Alaska. I'm here in downtown Anchorage as protesters are streaming back into Town Square Park. For the second time in April, Americans are protesting nationwide, showing their disapproval for a number of decisions made by the Trump administration. Anchorage crowds filled nearly 5 blocks while they marched to Peterson Towers, holding signs addressing Medicare cuts, Elon Musk's role in government, LGBTQ+ rights, and deportations. Some specifically referencing the unlawful abduction of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Aaron Jackson Hill, executive director of Stand Up Alaska, said this is intended to be a peaceful protest. But Americans are angry. In the bigger picture, she tells us protesters are demanding humanity from those in charge.
Governments aren't supposed to make a profit. They're there to take care of the people. And so that's what we want, is we want elected officials that are more interested in people than they are the bottom line.
In one of the many protests across our nation and in the state of Alaska, in downtown Anchorage, for Alaska's News Source, I'm Olivia Nordyke.
In addition to Anchorage, Wasilla, Juneau, Fairbanks, Soldotna, Kodiak, Nome, and Petersburg also participated in the second hands-off nationwide protest. As Olivia mentioned, one of the cornerstone issues for the protesters was a Maryland man who was illegally deported to El Salvador by mistake. Friday, the president doubling down on the decision, saying Abrego Garcia was a violent person.
This man is according to certified statements that we get, is a very violent person. And they want this man to be brought back into our country where he can be free and to stay as a happily Maryland, they call him the Maryland man. He's a Maryland father. No, this is a violent person.
Early Saturday, the Supreme Court paused the deportation of immigrants under the Alien Enemies Act. The ruling froze any action in the case involving a group of Venezuelan immigrants in Texas. They filed an emergency appeal at the High Court on Friday, claiming they were at risk of being removed from the country without sufficient notice to challenge their deportation. The Supreme Court issues the temporary pause without explaining their reasoning. The justices also ordered the Trump administration to respond to the emergency appeal once a federal appeals court in Louisiana takes action in the case. Conservative Justices Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas dissented. Switching gears, let's head over to the Weather Center for a first look at the forecast with meteorologist Robert Forget.
Well, thanks, Adelma. You know, it's been a relatively tranquil last 12 hours, except for a little bit of shaking. I know some folks heard that and felt that, and as a result, a lot of questions from that. We had one at 11:18. That was 52 miles west of Anchorage. That was a 4.3 magnitude. And then this morning at about 5 a.m., 5:01 to be exact, about 32 miles west of Kenai and Cook Inlet, we saw a 3.9. Wanted just to make sure everyone understands these are typical tectonic activity when it comes to earthquakes. It is not volcanic in nature, and it's not associated with Mount Spur. Nothing's changed with that. We're still in yellow for Mount Spur. So they were not related to Mount Spur. They're just typical tectonic activity that we see as a result of the two plates crashing together as they always do. Hey, current conditions, still seeing some sunshine and the Kenai, temperatures in the 40s everywhere in South Central, but a little bit of cloudiness up until Keatna and also Golcana. As we take a look, we're expecting 46 was our high today, 47's normally the temperature, 34 the low last night, 32 the normal. And tonight, looking for, again, partly cloudy skies, light winds, and also those winds being out of the south at 5 miles per hour. Looks like a fairly nice day through South Central, but things will change as we continue into the evening tomorrow and then into Monday. So I'll have the complete forecast coming up in just a bit.
Thank you so much, Robert. Still to come on the news at 5. It has been 30 years since a deadly bombing in Oklahoma City. We have a look back at the devastating day. Later, Fairbanks had a new type of festival not yet seen in the community. We'll take you to Scale Fest later in the show.
You're watching Alaska's news source.
Saturday marks the 30th anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. 168 people were killed and hundreds more were injured. A remembrance ceremony was held to honor the victims. Former President Bill Clinton was the keynote speaker. Jen Sullivan reports on how the community came together to remember that dark day.
30 years ago, Lord, was truly a dark and evil day.
Chaplain Teddy Wilson remembering the horrific bombing in Oklahoma City. He was one of the many emergency responders who rushed to help.
10 a.m., just 1 hour after the murderous blast. The living dig their way out of a cement tomb.
Evacuating downtown Oklahoma City.
One big boom.
On April 19th, 1995, a rental truck filled with bombs exploded outside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. 168 people were killed. 19 of them were children in the building's daycare center. Hundreds more were injured.
On the day that it happened, you think it's the end of the world. It feels like it's the end of the world.
Edie Rains lost both her sons that day. 3-year-old Chase and 2-year-old Colton were at the daycare located on the second floor of the federal building when it was hit. Her brother, a police officer at the time, found their bodies. 30 years later, it's still the worst act of homegrown terrorism in the nation's history, according to the FBI.
An act of unimaginable violence that changed our city.
Saturday, hundreds of people gathered for a service to remember those who lost their lives that day. Former President Bill Clinton, who was president at the time, sharing his thoughts.
In the end, it brought out the best in America. First responders, doctors, nurses, construction workers from all across America put their own lives on hold and showed up here.
Where the bombing happened now sits a national memorial and museum. 168 bronze and granite chairs, one for each person killed in the blast. I'm Jen Sullivan reporting.
Thanks for listening. Click subscribe so you can get the latest podcast from Alaska's news source automatically. And stay up to date with breaking news and in-depth reporting available for free 24/7 with the Alaska's news source app.